Could everybody say their name and say how they were involved in that year?
Okay, my name is Perry Brass. I'm a writer. I've published 14 books that all deal with the gay experience. I joined GLF in November of 1969, 2 months after my 22nd birthday. I joined with two main focuses. One of them was I was overjoyed at the idea that gay people were fighting back. I had arrived from the Deep South and lived in New York, and I always had that kind of Southern take-no-shit attitude. And it just killed me that so many people in New York I found in the bars. I'd been out for, at that point at 22, I'd been out for 5 years, still had this constant cringing, passive attitude. And the other focus was that I wanted to get involved with the GLF newspaper, which is called Come Out. I'd been writing gay material, and I'd been told I'd never be able to get it published. And I joined the Come Out staff in the third issue of the newspaper. And I do have some photocopies of Come Out on this table over here, and I hope that you'll get a chance to look at it. Come Out was an amazing newspaper. It had a totally radical viewpoint. It was the world's first gay liberation newspaper. It was the world's first paper that looked at the gay experience from a political liberation point of view. But what I really wanted to talk about today for a couple of minutes is what were the accomplishments of GLF. I did a talk at NYU a couple of months ago in front of NYU LGBT students, and the first question that people asked me was, what did GLF accomplish? We've heard about GLF a little bit, not very much. Nobody talks about GLF anymore. They talk about other groups. We want to know, what did GLF accomplish? And I thought, people need to know this. So I prepared a short statement about this, and I'm going to read it off, and I hope you don't mind this. What I find so wonderful about this room right now is that I can feel the kind of energy in this room we used to have in GLF, which is the idea that this is your story. I'm telling your story to you, and all of you are going to pick up on some piece of your own story waiting right now. GLF provided the radical, centrifugal energy needed to, if not create the modern gay movement, then to bring it back to Harry Hayes' very radical dream of liberation that Hay wanted the first Mattachine society to have. GLF's own radical structure and thought process did that. Radical means to go back to the roots of a situation. It's where our word radish comes from, to radicalize, to go back to the very root of the problem. This was a problem that had been destroying LGBT people in America for millennia. That is, in America with its Anglo-Saxon heritage of Puritanism, under a relentless regime of competition, suppression and censorship, and environmental destruction. It had reduced queer people to being worthless, incapable of decency, honesty, and heroism, to being, if not the constant effete victims, then the constant Hollywood villains as seen in Alfred Hitchcock movies like Strangers on a Train or Psycho. We were either the Freudian mama's boy sissies who never grow up, or the manipulative, hard-edged, merciless dykes. We were the outcasts from Sodom and Gomorrah who deserved their fate, and GLF took all of that shit and tossed it right out the window. Instead of the later Mattachine's pitiful call for a grudging acceptance and tolerance, we declared that we were a necessary part of the order of nature. Instead of psychiatry's mythologies that so many of us desperately clung to as they were killing us, as we were being hospitalized, lobotomized, castrated, or chemicalized, we declared in one stroke that society itself was sick, and that this sickness could only be addressed through a complete redressing of society. Before GLF, the attitude was that at some point, homosexuals would adjust themselves into some toleration by society. GLF said that we could look at society ourselves and see it through the lens of our own oppression and galvanize the queer world enough to throw off the chains that held us back. We saw the constant homophobia that permeated the very language we speak, and it still does permeate our language. The sexism and racism that we felt bind together capitalism and produce a constant class of losers. And you see this every day in all of our media, that behind this we saw the white patriarchy behind sexism and racism, and we finally started to look at each facet of society individually and in concert that promoted and promulgated gay oppression, such as religion, the law, medicine, the arts, the military, business and commerce. We started looking at each of these instruments of our own oppression and seeing within them the radical roots of our own constant daily queer destruction. And we did this through the work that GLF did all the time. Now, GLF and the people in it did not cook up these ideas from scratch. As Fran said, we got some of them through our own revolutionary work with other groups that provided the radical and youthful energy needed to blow accommodation out of the water and to bring in a new atmosphere of self-invention, acceptance, and genuine love. We did this through ideas and tools that have been brought to us from other parts of radical movements from this period, namely through the women's movement, the peace movement, the student movement, and the movement for racial equality. Foremost was consciousness raising, the very idea that human consciousness itself creates institutions of oppression, and we can change consciousness by becoming aware of how it forms us and how it is deformed through oppression. This was borrowed from the women's movement and also the peace movement. The second was collectivism, the idea that together we could do more things better than we could individually. This was brought about through the constant use of consensus at our meetings rather than voting. The idea being that we'd have no losers in GLF, we'd have no alienated minorities within our own alienated minority. Instead, we would come to a real consensus among us. Sometimes this worked out beautifully, and at other times this did not work out.
To say the least.
Yeah, to say the least. But it also came with an intention to say that every one of us was important, that every person in the room had something to add to the consensus. It also went against that queer stereotype that said that gay people cannot be trusted together, that our only intention when we come together is that of sexual gratification. It said that we can come together for other purposes and a larger purpose than ourselves individually. Third was the power of the media, especially the radical underground media of this period, which we used as best we could. It also included the idea of inventing gay media. Instead, this was something that older homophile organizations couldn't even imagine. So instead of going to like a magazine like Time and saying, well, would you please give us a little grudging bit of respect now? We're going to show you that we are as good as anybody else. We said, no, we would blow the mainstream media out of the water and create our own media. Along with this, GLF literally created the idea of gay art. This was a totally revolutionary idea, and I remember at one of my first GLF meetings when a wonderful lesbian named Pat Maxwell said, we're going to invent gay art. And I thought, this is crazy. We can't have gay art. No one's ever heard of gay art. But we did it. We said we will create gay art and gay writing, and instead of the old format in which you had a couple of gay writers whose work was considered so outre that they were like a sideshow in the mainstream, we would bring about a gay art that was revolutionary. The fourth thing we did was dealing with sex itself. We rejected the old sexual role types of top and bottom, hustler and John, butch and femme, Maricon and macho, man-boy, and also S&M. We felt that within the context of the times that these roles were exploitative, and they had to be looked at as such. The idea being that within each of these roles, someone was being termed as acceptable and someone was being termed as unacceptable. Someone was on top, someone was on the bottom. Someone could pass as non-queer and someone would be cast as queer. We wanted to blow these roles up and open them up so that we would have a sexually egalitarian society. This is one of GLF's most controversial stances, and it often led to derision from non-GLF people who were in other parts of the gay movement. But it did allow us to examine roles, sex roles, and see them in the light of oppression and exploitation, and if necessary, to reform our thinking about these roles. I think that in doing this, GLF radicalized sex roles enough to bring about much of what in the current academic thinking is called post, as in GLF inaugurated even ideas of post-gay or post-queer or genderqueer. We went back and started that type of thinking. We could look at sex roles and then change them instead of simply marching lockstep in them. Now, we did all of this within the space of about 3 years, from 1961 to 1971. GLF had no dues.
69 to 71. You said 61.
Oh, did I say so? Sorry. 69 to 71. It was 3 years, from 69 to 71. Those are the GLF years. We had no dues. We did not follow Robert's Rules of Order. We had no membership lists. Meetings were free for anyone who came in, and some people thought that the meetings became free-for-all. The disorderliness of our meetings became legendary. All work was done by cells or affinity groups, and some of these groups went on to become separate organizations, and we've mentioned some of them, like Radical Lesbians, Gay Youth, Third World Gay Revolution, Street Transvestites Action Revolution, or STAR, the Iron Butterfly Group, and then the Come Out cell that published the GLF newspaper, Come Out. We also organized a speakers bureau, and for many people, this was their very first connection with the gay world through GLF speakers. This was just unheard of. There were also work cells that put on dances and organized demonstrations, which we called actions, which later put on the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, which later became New York's Gay Pride Parade. I think the thing that characterized GLF to me was a sense of freedom, support, and affinity. GLF literally invented the idea of the gay community. Before that, that idea was just not even imagined. We did that with our first open dances that were held outside of bars, and our constant calls for community actions, and also our desire to call each other brothers and sisters. To me, that is the lasting legacy of the Gay Liberation Front, that we could think of each other as our brothers and sisters. I can still hear Bob Kohler using those words at the very first Sunday night meeting that I went to. I can still hear him saying that, and all of us saying it, and I want to believe it. I want to believe that we are still our brothers and sisters. Thank you.